So Bernie Sanders wrote an op-ed the other day where he basically argued, look, Democrats should not only run on abortion, they should run on a variety of issues, including economic issues. Crystal did a monologue on that. You guys should definitely go check that out. But Bernie now, I guess he's doing a round of interviews where he's giving his advice to the Democratic Party as to what to do in the midterms, and he's reiterating a lot of the points that he had in his op-ed. So I wanted to watch this interview here with Jake Tapper, and we'll break down what he says, where I think he's right, where I think he's wrong. Shout out to Case Study QB, who of course does a great job following mainstream media, so you and I don't have to, and he gives us the interesting bits and pieces. So let's dive into it.
Well, Jake, first of all, I happen to believe that the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe versus Wade is an absolute outrage. I think Democrats have got to fight to make sure that it is women who control their own bodies, not the government. So I think this is a very important issue. But I don't believe it can be the only issue. At a time when we have an economy in which the wealthiest people, the billionaire class, are getting much, much richer while working people are struggling to put food on the table, it goes without saying that we have got to focus on the economy and demand that we have a government that works for all of us and not just wealthy campaign contributors.
All right, so first of all, my message has always been very similar to Bernie's, that when we talk about politics, when we talk about campaigning, I agree with him that you want to put economics first and foremost, because material conditions, it's the most important thing. I think it drives voters more than anything else. I think it drives them more than culture war stuff, generally speaking, because, everybody relates to it. Everybody, has to pay the light bill, has to pay the water bill, has to put food on the table, has to make sure there's enough to take care of their kids, hopefully can save up enough money to take a vacation or whatever. All these things, it's a universal experience, and it can bring people together. So I agree with him on that front. But I will say this. I do feel like now that Roe versus Wade has been overturned, I absolutely think you should incorporate this message, the pro-choice message, into your campaigns. And I like the idea of broadcasting that, hey, we believe in freedom. The right doesn't believe in freedom. They like to talk about freedom, but in terms of actually protecting your freedom, we're going to do that. We're going to do that. I mean, these people want to ban abortion and have no exceptions. They don't want an exception for rape, for incest, for life of the mother. They don't want an exception for some underage girl who was taken advantage of. They don't want any exceptions. So we believe in freedom. They don't believe in freedom. So I just want to say, I agree with what Bernie's saying here, but I don't want it to be misinterpreted by people as like, don't talk about abortion at all. Because I definitely don't agree with that. You definitely should talk about that issue. It's a super important issue. And effectively, it's a terrible policy that was a messaging gift to the Democrats, because this is, you can, just clonk them over the head with this repeatedly. And it works. I mean, this is why in some of the special elections that we saw recently, the Democrats overperformed in a lot of the polls, because people, they saw what happened with Roe versus Wade, and maybe a couple of other things also probably played into that, but they were like, holy shit, this is new. This is a new kind of extremism that perhaps people thought, this was relegated to the dustbin of history. No, it wasn't. It's right there just under the surface, in the same way that it was 157 Republicans in the House voted against gay marriage. This didn't go away. It's right there under the surface. 195 Republicans in the House voted against a right to contraception. These issues matter. And you get to say, we're pro-freedom, they're anti-freedom, vote for us to protect your freedom. So I just want to say, I think he's right, but I don't want people to misinterpret it as never talk about abortion. No, now it's a whole new ballgame, and you should talk about it a lot. Maybe before Roe versus Wade was overturned, it wouldn't make sense to really run campaigns with the centerpiece being abortion, but now there's definitely an argument for it.
And the irony here is Republicans say, they talk about the economy. Really, not one of them is going to vote to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. Not one of them is going to vote for legislation that makes it easier for workers to join unions. Mm-hmm. Not one of them is going to vote to do what every other major country on earth does and guarantee health care for all people, nor will they vote to raise taxes on billionaires at a time when the richest...
He's spitting. That's true. And these arguments are very powerful.
People in this country, in some cases, pay nothing in federal income tax. So I happen to think The Republican line is phony, and Democrats have got to respond.
So might the concern be among Democratic strategists that, hey, Democrats are the party in power, underlying the economic problems that you just underlined, might be underlying the failure of the Democratic Party, which controls the House, the Senate, and the White House, to deliver?
That is a fair point by Jake Tapper. Because, Bernie's like, let's run on this economic stuff that we're going to do. And it's like, well, hold on. You guys were just talking about that in the last election cycle, and you only got a small percentage of the things you said you wanted. So, why should a voter believe you? Like, no, this time, for real, $15 minimum wage, when you guys ran on it last time, you tried to get it, and it failed. So, that message might ring a little hollow. And perhaps that is an argument for, well, at least the abortion stuff will land, whereas this stuff, there's going to be some degree of skepticism that's merited among the public. That's like, hold on, you just ran on this, and you didn't deliver it, now you want to run it again? That's a little off. That's actually, shockingly, a good question by Jake Tapper. And I think he pushes him on it as well. We'll see. There's another question he asked, which I actually think is pretty astute.
Well, that's simply just not accurate. The truth is that inflation, which is a very serious problem in our country, is a global problem. In the UK and in Europe, in many cases, it is worse than it is here.
That is true. That is true, that inflation is worse in some other countries than it is here. So the idea that that's all, you blame Joe Biden for all of that doesn't make sense. The real issue here, and Bernie's going to talk about this, I should just let him talk about it, but he goes on to bring up the supply chain is the big problem leading to inflation. Corporate greed leads to inflation. Monopolies lead to inflation. Maybe some small percentage of it is the big spending bills that we did. But again, you're seeing worse inflation elsewhere compared to the United States. So to put the blame on Biden, it really doesn't make sense on that front. You could say, hey, fix the supply chains. But it's actually true that they are trying to do that. We have microchip manufacturing that's coming back to the United States. We're onshoring, about 350,000 of them. So they are trying to address that.
Here in the United States. So to blame Joe Biden for it just doesn't make any sense at all. What the inflation crisis is about is broken supply chains. It's the war in...
So he goes on to make that argument. Let me get to the next Tapper question, because it's actually a good one.
Inflation is a global problem that stood up for working families. And the question is, the country makes huge profits. Why are we the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people? Why do you have half of the elderly people in this country earning less than $25,000 a year, and you got Republicans out there who want to cut Social Security, they want to cut Medicare, they want to cut Medicaid so they can give more tax breaks to their billionaire friends? Those are the kinds of issues that we need to be discussing, in my view.
Right, but that's my point. I mean, the issues that you feel passionately about, paid family and medical leave, college affordability, home health care, housing child care assistance, you tried to get all those things done. They got cut from the Democratic proposal. I mean, there are Democrats out there, progressives, who are big Bernie Sanders supporters, who are saying, why should we vote for Democrats? Bernie, you've been fighting a good fight, but all that stuff got stripped from the legislation that passed the House and Senate. And
good question.
That is a good question. Let's see if Bernie has a good answer to that.
All right, Jake, that is an excellent question. And let me give you the simple answer. The simple answer is, with President Biden's strong support, we presented a piece of legislation called Build Back Better, which in many ways would have done more for the working class and the middle class of this country than any legislation passed in the last 50 or 60 years. It was transformative. We had zero Republican support, not one Republican who believed that we should deal with child care, that we should deal with health care, that we...
Okay, but are you going to bring up the obvious point, the elephant in the room, that it wasn't just Republicans who killed it? Who else killed it? Manchin and Sinema. Let's see if he brings it up.
To deal with education, not one Republican supporting it. Unfortunately, in a Senate that is 50-50, 50 Republicans, 50 people in the Democratic caucus, there were two corporate Democrats who chose not to support what the president and I and the vast majority of the caucus wanted. That's the reality. We had 48 votes. We couldn't get 50. My hope is that we will elect 2 more Democrats, so we'll have 52 in the Senate so that we can begin to address the long neglected needs of working families. It is just not acceptable that we have more income and wealth inequality today than we've ever had in this country. It's not acceptable that you got 500,000 people who are homeless in America, rents are soaring, and we're not building the kind of low and moderate income housing that we need.
So he does bring it up. Now, the counter argument to what Bernie is saying here is this. There's this thing in politics called the rotating villain theory, which is like, look, if it wasn't Manchin and Sinema who were blocking the entire Build Back Better agenda, then what would have happened is 2 others would have stepped up. It would have been Mark Warner, and it would have been one of the other corporate Democrats, one of the other Democrats that's from a red state, and so they have this nominal cover to be like, well, I don't know about this because I'm from a Republican state, and so I need to flex my bipartisan credentials and therefore kill any and all progress in the right direction. So that's the counter to that. The counter to that is you're blaming Manchin and Sinema, but in reality, if it wasn't them, it'd be 2 others. And also, if you guys remember, back when we were having that debate about the $15 minimum wage and putting it in one of the reconciliation packages, Bernie did force a vote on the floor to incorporate it or not, and there were, I think, 6 or 7 Democrats in the Senate who functionally were against the $15 minimum wage. So, in other words, there is some truth to the counter to Bernie here that, man, I don't know, man, even if we get what you say you want, 52 Democratic senators, where's the guarantee that there won't be just the right number to kill any really, truly transformative change? Now, there is a rebuttal to that, though. There is a rebuttal to that. I think it's a fair point, but I think there's a better point, which is this. So, this idea that, it's like a law of nature, that there has to be some percentage of Democrats that are just basically Republican light, I think that's totally bogus. And I think the evidence of that is Warnock and Ossoff in Georgia, where they come from a nominal red state. They won their elections, and Ossoff and Warnock, ever since getting to the Senate, they are not Joe Manchin. They are not Kyrsten Sinema. They have voted in a way that is alignment with solidly blue senators. They voted in a way that's in alignment with Bernie Sanders. And so, really, the reaction is, okay, not only do you need 52 Democratic senators, you need the right kind of Democratic senators. And the fact of the matter is, the argument about the rotating villain theory, it's a fair point, but it's not as devastating and debate-ending as many people think, because as we've seen recently, we can clearly get more stuff done than what a lot of people thought, including myself, right? Like the Inflation Reduction Act, it was definitely a half measure, it was definitely kind of weak, but there are unquestionably some great provisions in there that are super fucking important. Super important. The 15% corporate minimum tax rate is a huge deal. I don't think people realize how big of a deal that is. The tax on stock buybacks is a huge deal. The, $6,000, $7,000 tax credit for electric vehicles, that's a huge deal. So again, the point is, even with a very shitty Senate, with at least 6 or 7 very shitty Democrats, you still got some things that I was surprised that we got. So now imagine a situation where the Democrats who come from the red states are more like Ossoff and Warnock than they are like Sinema and Manchin. And then, look, you'll at least be able to get, 50% of what we were talking about with Build Back Better? And that's a fucking game changer. So what's the argument that Bernie should be making, that Biden should be making? It should be crystal clear. They should say, yeah, get us 2 more senators. Here's exactly what you're going to get. I will give you a list of exactly what you're going to get. Universal pre-K should be on that list. Paid family leave should be on that list. Make a list of the 5 things that you know you have the votes for. Codifying Roe versus Wade, right? Codifying gay marriage, which is something that, it might be on the chopping block next with the Supreme Court, so why not protect it so that when they overturn it, it's still the law of the land. Make a list of the things that you're actually going to get, and then say, if you give me the 2 more senators, this is exactly what you're going to get. So, that's the reaction to that. unfortunately, there is some truth in the rotating villain theory, but it's not some ironclad law of nature that the Democrats have to be like Cinnamon Manchin. Because Ossoff and Warnock prove you could have a Democratic senator from a red state who actually votes the right way. So if you get the right number of Democrats with the right flavor of ideology that you need to get this stuff done, you can get it done. You can get it done. Because we've already seen some stuff get done, even with this horrendous Senate, with the slim margin for the Democrats, with a lot of shitty Democrats, right? So, but look, all this comes to naught anyway, because what Bernie should be doing, I like his advice to Democrats, that's all fine and dandy, but, you know, you should be holding Biden more accountable behind the scenes in terms of his executive orders. And look, maybe that's one of the reasons why Biden did go as far as he did so far, which, in all seriousness, surprised me. The pardon for the nonviolent drug offenders at the federal level and prodding the states to do the same, the reduction of student loan debt, but Bernie should be talking to his good friend Joe Biden and really holding him accountable and saying, look, here are the other things you can do with just the swipe of a pen. You know, you could give everybody health care with just the swipe of a pen. You have the ability to do that. We have, as a provision of Obamacare, in Libby, Montana, they have basically free health care there. Because they say, hey, when there's a national emergency and there's a national crisis, you absolutely can cover everybody's health care under Medicare or Medicaid. Biden could do that with the swipe of a pen. Okay, Bernie, this is the stuff you should be prodding Biden to do behind the scenes. And, you know, I don't know how he's doing it, what his strategy is, how persistent he is, etc. But that's what I'd like to see from Bernie. More basically holding Joe Biden accountable. But in terms of his advice to the Democratic Party, hey, this is how you should run, I think he's largely correct. And I also think they should be more clear about the rebuttal to that rotating villain theory, which is, we've already got a bunch of shit done with a shitty Democratic Senate. So if you just get the right number of Democrats with the right ideology, then you actually could get, I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, man. Could you imagine? Imagine 2 more Democratic senators that are not like Manchin and Sinema. Yeah, you could get universal pre-K. You can get extended child tax credit, which was a huge thing that reduced poverty all across the country. It was 50% reduction in child poverty while we had the extended child tax credit. But of course it went away. But what does that show you? It shows you that child poverty is a policy choice. You can change it with the right policy. If we can get that extended child tax credit, that'd be huge. That'd be so big. That'd be so big. And you go back and check out that original, Build Back Better proposal. Medicare expansion. Like, that shit is back on the table. But they gotta be clear about it, and it should be super intuitive to everybody. Here's what we need, here's what we'll get you, and that's it. But honestly, I don't think they want to do it, because then they're held to that, and look, that's the way politics should be. But, they probably noticed with the $2,000 checks thing they did, oh, we're gonna do it, and then they only got us $1,400, and so even though they had a high approval rating at the time, there's some people in the base who are going to be like, well, fuck you. You said 2,000, not 1,400. So anyway, that's my breakdown of it. Overall, I think his advice is pretty solid. You can run on being pro-freedom, pro-choice, making those arguments, but also, yes, it should be economy as well, and it should be very clear as to what are the stakes in this election, because we all know, if Republicans win, what are they going to do? They're going to do more tax cuts for the rich. They're going to do more deregulation. They're going to do more corporate tax cuts. This is all they have. This is their whole ideology. And they do it every time they're in power, and they won't stop. So make that clear. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.